Everything okay, Fred?
Well, the last time I saw my grandma, I used a different name and pronoun.
Could Netflix maybe just keep the non-binary propaganda out of cartoons for little kids? We're going to break down the latest boycott that's breaking the internet and so much more on today's episode of the Barad versus Everyone podcast, my daily show where I cover internet insanity and social media chaos, all from an independent perspective. Guys, like I mentioned, we are going to talk about a online right-wing boycott being waged against Netflix right now. Major MAGA figures from the YouTuber and influencer Benny Johnson to even Elon Musk, obviously the ex-owner and billionaire entrepreneur, are leading the charge. They're getting lots of people, at least on the surface, to cancel their Netflix accounts because of allegations that Netflix has inappropriate, age inappropriate, and frankly kind of creepy gender ideology propaganda pushed in its programming for young children. These are serious accusations, but before we get into more of the specifics, let's just take a look at this CNBC clip that shows, whatever you think of it, the boycott already having an impact. Take a look.
Netflix shares falling over 2% today after Elon Musk urged his followers on X to cancel their subscriptions. Musk taking issue with the presence of a transgender character on one of the streaming platform shows. He posted, "Cancel Netflix for the health of your kids," this morning. Our Steve Kovac has more on all of this drama. Steve?
Oh, boy, here we go. Look at the power of an Elon Musk tweet, Mel, because the targeted rage of that tweet and of his fans and followers, they sent Netflix shares down 2% today after Musk spent part of his day tweeting about that Netflix show called Dead End Paranormal Park, which features a transgender character. It's an animated show, by the way. Now, I think you guys can see where this is going. Musk called on his followers to cancel Netflix and said he already did so himself. He also criticized Netflix's DEI policies and pointed to it as another reason to cancel the service. There's also a lot of Charlie Kirk talk being thrown in there as well. Now, look, Dead End Paranormal Park, it was actually canceled back in 2023 after a 20-episode run of the show in 2022, so about 3 years old. The show is still hosted on Netflix like any other canceled originally programming Netflix has made. Now, it appears that the X account called Libs of TikTok discovered the show and posted about it on X, which drew Musk's attention and anger.
So, look, I wanted to include this because of the economic impact, but also to talk about some media bias, because I'm normally thinking CNBC does a somewhat okay job on reporting on things, but this was a really misleading and biased segment. They're like not giving the backlash here the credit or just factual representation that it deserves. Elon Musk and others were not mad that Netflix simply had a transgender character in a show on their platform. They were very specifically upset about multiple examples of trans or non-binary characters and ideas in young children's animated shows. Not just, oh, there's a show with trans characters for adults on Netflix. That's not what people are mad about. And it just was a real misrepresentation. They don't have to support this boycott, but you should at least represent it fairly and give it an honest shake if you're going to cover it at all, not kind of caricature it as if they're just triggered by the fact that any trans people exist and are in any shows ever, which I'm certainly not. It doesn't bother me at all if there's shows on Netflix where there's trans characters. However, some of the stuff that people are circulating on X right now, clips from these shows that are geared towards children, are incredibly disturbing. Even to me as a gay man, even to me as somebody who's happy for trans adults to live however will make them happiest, I have an issue with these ideas and this ideology being pushed on incredibly young children in some of these ways. And that doesn't make you a mean, evil bigot. And at the very least, if people are boycotting and are upset about it, media coverage should represent it fairly. At least that's what I think. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm old fashioned, but let me know in the comments, like, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. Now we're going to take a look at the person leading this charge, Benny Johnson, or at least he's one of the big guys behind this, the MAGA YouTuber and influencer who, frankly, I have a lot of disagreements with. But on this one, I think he's at least raising some valid concerns. Let's roll his video where he explains why they're boycotting and features multiple examples of programming that he objects to. Take a look at this.
Why this Netflix cancellation campaign has gone so viral, with hundreds of thousands of people canceling their Netflix subscriptions, including Elon Musk, is the #1 trend in the world, and Netflix has lost billions of dollars in their stock. You can see right here an absolute collapse today. The reason why this is actually happening isn't your standard red versus blue political issue. It's a lot deeper than that. It's a moral issue. Have you seen what Netflix has been putting in their children's shows? This isn't like we're trying to push one way or the other. We want Democrats to win. You know, we want like everyone like socialism. Like, it's not like that, okay? Open borders even. It's so much worse. They're sexualizing children. It's got to be the single most radical thing you can do, the single most morally indefensible thing you can do. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to play you all the clips. I'm going to show you what they're putting into their programming. That's why this has gone so viral, because Netflix has truly crossed the line. If you believe that this is wrong, you should also cancel your Netflix. Okay, here we go. Here's the mashup of every time Netflix has put transgender, sexualized radical ideology into their children's programming.
How about you break out those moves for your two biggest fans?
I know I'm safe when I'm with my friends or other non-binary people.
Non-binary?
People who aren't female or male. Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed.
Nightshades pronouns are they, them.
He or she just doesn't fit who I am.
My apologies. Please switch there, please.
I'm trans, Norma. And everyone at school knows, and everyone at home knows. And being here, it's like a whole new place.
It's Cherry Chip reporting from the wedding of the year. Everyone's favorite karate instructor, Sensei Dave, will be marrying mixed martial arts champion Jiu-Jitsu Joe.
He's the undisputed champion of my heart.
Everything okay, Fred? Well, the last time I saw my grandma, I used a different name and pronouns.
Cancel your Netflix.
So I want to unpack a lot of what he just talked about there. There's part I agree with, and then part that I don't really think is right. So the first part is, there's clearly content in these shows, and these are just brief snippets, but some of them I'm familiar with at more length, that is inappropriate for young children. Young children should not be told that some people are neither male nor female. That's literally untrue. There are two biological sexes, with the exception of extremely rare intersex conditions, but even most of them can be categorized as male or female. And it's not a feeling inside, it's an objective biological fact. So we should not be miseducating and brainwashing children as to ascientific identities and ideologies like non-binary. That's totally inappropriate for impressionable young mushy minds. And I would really object to my kids watching such a show of any kind. And then when it comes to the existence of trans people being depicted in some of these shows, like the character saying, I'm trans, I think it is probably not appropriate. I think it is not appropriate to have that in kids' shows, because the tiny percentage of children who from a very young age will experience gender dysphoria don't need representation. They don't need that prompted, right? It's something that they've experienced. I talked to Blair White about this a while back on my channel. From as young as 5 years old, she knew something was different. She felt like she was supposed to be a girl, even though she was born a boy. There was no prompting needing. But when you have these impressionable young kids telling them that actually you can just choose your gender, even though you really can't, only in extremely rare conditions where you have intense gender dysphoria, might you be best served by living as if you are the other gender, but you can't literally change it, then you are kind of planting a seed or opening up possibilities or questionings to kids in a way that is just not necessary. The very small percentage of children who will actually organically struggle with this still will, without it prompted. And I don't know why you would want to possibly encourage more and or cause doubt or confusion in the identities of more young people. So I think it's very inappropriate. I will say that I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with some of these kid shows just depicting two dads having a child that was shown in Benny Johnson's clip depicting two men getting married. To me, I don't think that's inappropriate for children. That exists. It's not inherently sexual any more than it would be to show a man and a woman getting married. And simply depicting to children things that exist in reality, to me, I would have no issue with my kid watching that. I think a lot of people wouldn't. Now, some might who have more traditional conservative values, but to me, that's on them to then screen what content they want their kids to watch and make sure they're not just blindly showing it. But I don't think it's inherently bad that Netflix simply has shows that include that on their platform. I don't see an issue with that because there's lots of people who think that's fine or have no issue with it, and it's a fact of life. So if people want their kids to watch that, and that's the other thing that I have to object to that Benny says. He says they are sexualizing children, which is a very serious accusation, right? But I think something can be inappropriate. They can be pushing ideology on kids. They can be brainwashing kids. They can even be including age inappropriate context. But the clips that I watched, I didn't see any children being sexualized, like in terms of depicted in some sort of inappropriate manner. I mean, even when they're talking about gender identities, that's not inherently to do with anything sort of sexual activity related. And then simply two men getting married or being married isn't introducing anybody to sexuality or sex. It's a depiction of a family that exists in the real world, in the same way that, like, if there was a wedding where a man and a woman were getting married in a show, you wouldn't say they're pushing sex on kids, right? It's not inherently sexual. And to make that kind of accusation and then show us a bunch of clips that don't actually have it in it, I think is irresponsible. Benny also claims that this should be illegal in his tweet about it. And that I have to disagree. I mean, first off, the First Amendment would protect all the depictions, whether you think they're appropriate or not. And I think a lot of them are inappropriate that we just saw. They would be unambiguously protected by the First Amendment. And then some parents might want their kids to see that stuff. And that's their right. That's their choice. You can't make that illegal. And again, there's nothing actual. Of course, it can be illegal to expose children to explicit content, but there was no explicit content in any of the clips that he showed. So I just think it's perhaps so typical of our moment right now that the biggest MAGA culture warriors can have a legit complaint, but then they have to take it to 1,000. They have to exaggerate it. They have to, and maybe this is part of the creator economy. This is part of hyping it up for clicks. And maybe that's what Benny Johnson is doing here, but he is mischaracterizing it. And that tweet has over, I think, 6 million views. So that's kind of a big deal. And I just don't think it's right to accuse these showmakers of sexualizing kids when that's not what they did. What they did can be inappropriate. I wouldn't want my kids watching many of those. It can even be brainwashing or propaganda, but it's not sexualizing kids. And that's like a very serious accusation that you should not throw around at people without hardcore evidence. And on the broader question of whether you should boycott Netflix, I guess I just don't have strong feelings about this. What I would say is that you should probably be, especially very young children, like some of these shows are clearly geared towards like 5, 6, 7-year-olds. You should be screening what they watch anyway, like making sure that a show that you're putting on for them, you've done some research into it or what have you, because there's really no platform. I mean, Netflix is a woke company. They're all in on DEI stuff. They do all sorts of trans, non-binary, 2Q+ spirit stuff. And I certainly have no particular affinity for that. But any platform that big is going to have tons of stuff and stuff to cater to all sorts of people. And a lot of it's going to be stuff you don't like. Now, if you want to cancel over this, that's your right. I have no issue with it. Right? It's a free country. You can boycott something. Personally, will I cancel my Netflix because of this? No. If there's stuff I want to watch on Netflix, I'll keep watching it. But I would, if I had kids, I would already be screening what they're watching. So I wouldn't just be letting them watch anything on Netflix and then outsourcing my content judgment to Netflix. If you were doing that, that was probably already a mistake. But it makes sense to me why people are upset by this. I do think it's inappropriate, a lot of this. I do think there's some brainwashing content that gets snuck into these young children's shows by these extremely woke people who work in this industry and dominate. And I think we'll see. A lot of these boycotts, whether they're coming from the left or the right, don't tend to have a lasting impact. I think it's interesting that they had a noticeable stock dip, but I guess we'll have to see if it recovers and what the lasting impact will be. But I guess the TLDR here, I have no issue with people canceling their Netflix. That's your right. Vote with your wallet as a consumer. Boycott if you want. I agree there are some very legitimate concerns being raised here about some of this content, but people need to chill and be careful how they're framing things and not to distort or overreact to things. Now, one final thing I wanted to mention about this is that there's been some pushback from, for example, the Obama Democratic official at Turn Podcast Bro, Tommy Vitor, or Vitor, I don't know, sorry. Anyway, and he reacted to a tweet where Elon Musk says cancel Netflix and says, this guy went from calling himself a free speech absolutist to the most reactionary, whiny little cancel cover loving bitch on the internet. I'm not really sure I see the perceived inconsistency here, because maybe Elon has maybe violated his commitment to free speech in some other ways we could talk about, sure. But here he's saying that there's a company pushing inappropriate content on kids and engaging in DEI practices that he alleges are discriminatory, and we shouldn't support them. He's not calling for them to be shut down. He's saying, cancel your subscription, vote with your wallet. That's not really what cancel culture was, right? Cancel culture was people trying to dig up stuff and get people fired for archaic old tweets or jokes or takes that aged poorly, or people trying to shut down or silence other people, not just people choosing to stop supporting something that doesn't align with their values. That's always been kind of part of a free market capitalist culture. And I'm not sure there's necessarily an issue with it. Now, when it becomes a boycott that's framed like, take this person off air, that's more cancel culture-y to me. Like if they were leading a boycott to get Netflix banned from TV apps, like, or you understand what I'm saying, that would be different. And there have been right-wing boycotts, like get this show taken off the air, it's so problematic. But simply saying, we won't watch this show, we won't go see this movie, we won't subscribe to this streaming service because we find it objectionable, I don't really see an issue with that. I think that's actually like the definition of how the marketplace works. You support what you support and you don't support what you don't support. You vote with your wallet. I don't necessarily think that's inherently illiberal or censorious. I think that's inherent to choice, and we all do it every day in all sorts of ways. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Make sure to subscribe, yada, yada, yada. Oh, and remember, send in your voicemails for my Voicemail Friday episodes, where I react to your woke horror stories and give you advice and your personal scenarios and answer the questions y'all have for me. The link to send in one of those is in the description. Up next, we're going to check in with the left-wing streamer Hasan Piker, the far-left socialist, and frankly, he's kind of an internet celebrity at this point. Mainstream media does all these glowing profiles of him. But anyway, because he is a very popular streamer, he often appears at things like TwitchCon, which is put on by Twitch, the streaming company, the biggest streaming platform, I believe. And it's an in-person event where fans can go meet their biggest creators. Hasan says that he won't be attending this year because of security concerns for his personal safety. Let's listen to him address this.
I miss the social Hasan era. There is unfortunately an obvious setback there because of, one, all the political incidents that have taken place, and two, how those political incidents have had some pretty significant consequences in how much I can go out in the real world and socialize with other people. As I said already, I'm not going to TwitchCon, not because I'm worried about my own safety, but I'm literally not going to TwitchCon because I'm worried about the safety of others. I don't want to put them in the fucking crosshairs if some psycho freak decides, like, I'm going to go there. I'm very publicly not going to TwitchCon for that reason. So make with that information, do with that information what you will, right?
So I think this is an interesting development. One of the biggest internet celebrities, one of the most prominent voices of the online left, saying he can't go to a political conference because he thinks his safety would be in danger, or maybe he doesn't care about that, but he's worried about someone else getting hurt, which of course could happen if someone tried to hurt him. And I mean, first, the obvious point is like, that is terrible. That shouldn't be a thing in America. I made a video recently talking about how I similarly feel kind of concerned about doing in-person events. It shouldn't be like this. this is wrong. Nobody, left wing, right wing, independent, moderate, libertarian, whatever, should be afraid to speak their mind or to assemble in public that some crazy person might try to kill them. And frankly, like in terms of practical logistics, I don't think he's wrong to feel that way. Somebody with his level of fame, who engages in his level of rhetoric and controversy on the issues that he does, is not totally safe right now to just go out in public and speak before crowds. And I wouldn't be shocked, and God, I hope it never happens, but if somebody were to think of targeting somebody in retaliation, not that he did anything, but like in their mind, it would be retaliation for Charlie Kirk, that Hasan might be one of the people they come up with to go after, because he's not dissimilar. I mean, there's differences, of course, but he kind of fills a similar influencer, political leader, online star role that Charlie Kirk did. I think it's terrible that he feels like he can't go to TwitchCon and be safe. And I unambiguously condemn that, and I think it's horrible. But what I'm waiting for from Hasan, but I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for it, because I would pass out, is any sort of accountability or reckoning with the fact that American politics got this unhinged and this dangerous and this radical, in part because of the kind of rhetoric he's contributed to. I will insert some clips, so y'all don't have to believe me, just on my word, on face value. But Hasan Piker has engaged in openly violent rhetoric over and over and over again, including suggesting that it's fine to hurt capitalists. Of course, he says, out of context, was just joking. Make of that what you will. He has said that it would be defensible or justified to murder certain Republicans that he doesn't like because of allegations and that he says they're guilty of.
There's about $50 billion estimated that are lost every year in Medicaid, just in fraud alone. No.
That fraud is not coming from individuals, it's coming from providers. They're not tackling providers. They're not actually going after like false billing. They are trying to cut recipients, okay? It is not happening at the point of recipients. If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott, okay? You wouldn't make Rick Scott, former governor of Florida, Rick Scott, you wouldn't make him the current, what is his current office? What is he?
I mean, he really has pushed the limits to millions of impressionable young people with the most incendiary and violent rhetoric you can imagine from anybody at all close to the mainstream in American politics. And now he's scared to go out in public because things have gotten so heated. That's still wrong. I still don't want that for him. I still condemn that. But I would hope that it would prompt some introspection about like, maybe I shouldn't have said that Rick Scott should be murdered. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe this tit for tat escalation I have participated in was wrong. Maybe I should tone down my rhetoric. Maybe I should be more responsible. I would love to know if he's had those thoughts and he's just too afraid to say them, or if he doesn't even realize that he's contributed to this problem. I'm genuinely curious about that. But y'all let me know what you think. Especially, are there any Hasan fans in this audience? I'm genuinely quite curious, because him and I couldn't have less in common, really, other than being both online political commentators and somewhat attractive men. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe. Yada, yada, yada. Now, guys, one final thing I want to touch on. I saw something on TikTok that just, I think is gross. There's this group, Gen Z for Change. It's like a left-wing activist group from within the Democratic Party where they're like constantly pushing the Democrats to be more radical and more extreme and more progressive. Like they view Bernie as almost probably milquetoast. Anyway, they have decided to troll Charlie Kirk's legacy after his death. You know, in how just in like sweet things that sweet people do. Take a look at this video from them.
Well, this might be the thing that gets us canceled, but me and the team at Gen Z for Change just launched the memorial website that Charlie Kirk actually deserves. No, this is not a joke. We just thought it was strange that this man was given a national holiday by Congress, Democrats and Republicans, by the way, and yet when people talk about his legacy, they never mention anything he actually had to say. They'll say that he was a father and a husband and a content creator, and all of that is true, but if we're gonna make somebody a martyr, if he's gonna get statues and national holidays, we should talk about what he actually stood for. So we launched CharlieQuotes.com, which is full of all the things he had to say about women and their role, black people, trans people, gay people, and sources for all of it. We've got all the classics like MLK was an awful person and submit to your husband, Taylor Swift. We want to make it clear to all of the people who agreed with these things that he had to say that this is not the type of ideology that gets you celebrated. Fascist governments win when they get to revise history, tell us what the truth is, and tell us what we're not allowed to talk about. So even though this was risky, we're doing it anyway. If you want to help, share CharlieQuotes.com and let us know in the comments if there are any Charlieisms we missed.
Oh my gosh. The they all think they're Katniss Everdeen. They all think it's the Hunger Games. Fascist governments don't want us to share this information, as they cite a bunch of quotes that have been extensively recirculated and cited on every major cable news network, all the newspapers, everything. It's not a crime to be a jerk and to quote mine the worst or most controversial things Charlie Kirk ever said out after his death and say, he was terrible. Look at this quote he said that I've stripped of its context. And maybe it was bad, right? But even still, that really rubs me the wrong way. The way they're acting like that's somehow illegal or not allowed when it literally is. And nothing is going to happen to them from the government at all for posting this. That's not a thing. So they're just like, they all want to be Anne Frank so bad, and you're simply not, babe. But I just find this whole endeavor kind of gross. They're free to do it. They're free to put up their website, do whatever they want. But to me, it doesn't really matter that Charlie Kirk said things over the years that I find to be extreme or distasteful, because the thing that matters about his death the most is, one, the many people who will mourn him and miss him, but two, that it was fundamentally an attack on free speech, on democracy, and on American values. And so when people say, like I've said, that he's a free speech martyr, it's because of how he died, not because of every opinion he ever had. The same way that you can honor someone from the past, like Abraham Lincoln, who made major strides towards freeing slaves, even though he, I'm sure, said many things that you could put in a quote board that were offensive. It's just kind of a ridiculous endeavor to suggest that you can't honor someone's legacy unless you agree with everything they ever said, or there's no parts of it that are at all controversial or questionable. Then you really couldn't ever honor anyone's legacy. Seriously, it's just kind of a gross thing to do, especially because, and maybe this is why I feel sympathetic to Charlie on this kind of thing, anyone who does what we do and spends thousands, honestly, probably tens of thousands of hours mic'd up, talking to people in person or virtually about the most controversial subjects and discourse of the day, is going to say things that, especially stripped out of their context, but even in full context, might not age great. We're not perfect, but you could literally find an offensive quote board for any major political figure. And the idea that that's something you felt the need to do after a dude was killed in an act of political terrorism, I just think it's shameful and gross. And that you would feel this, these people would feel the same way if this, and God forbid, again, I don't ever want anything like this to happen. Something like this happened to Hasan Piker, and some Republicans put up like a website like HasanPikerQuotes.com, America deserved 9/11. I wouldn't do that. I'd be like, oh my God, it's horrible that he got killed just for speaking his mind. I condemn that terrorism completely. I wouldn't be like, oh, well, let me dig up the worst things he ever said out of context. That's just a gross impulse to me. That's just a flattening impulse to me that flattens the world, flattens people into these caricatures as if they're all bad, when in the real world, it's messy, it's complicated, there's shades of gray, people are complex, very, very, very few human beings I would probably go so far as to say no human beings, but maybe you can find an outlier example, are unambiguously good or unambiguously bad. Almost everyone has layers and dimensions. And this idea that you decided to troll and dance on Charlie Kirk's grave to be edgy or to make a statement as, you know, we're Gen Z for change. If this is your idea of change, I'll pass. Thank you very much, though. What do you guys think of this TikTok group? Let me know in the comments. And that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Do make sure you're subscribed. If you aren't yet, hit the like button. If you're here on YouTube, if you're listening on the audio podcast, please do take a second to rate and review wherever you listen to the show, and maybe consider recommending it to a friend who might enjoy it. And with that, guys, send in your voicemails for Voicemail Fridays, and we will talk again real soon.